What happens when a single text message rips open a family wound that never truly healed, turning a simple vacation into a battleground of dignity, love, and revenge? If you love intense emotional stories where hidden cruelty is exposed and justice unfolds in unexpected ways, make sure you subscribe to Roots of Revenge, like this video, and comment below so you don't miss what happens next, because this story only gets darker from here, and it all started at 11:47 p.m. when Lena's phone lit up on the nightstand with a message from her sister Camille that felt less like words and more like a slap. Your son won't fit in at SeaWorld. Our kids planned this for months. Don't ruin it. No greeting, no emoji, no softening, just that. And Lena felt her breath stall as she stared at the screen, rereading it again and again, her fingers beginning to tremble because she knew exactly what Camille meant. She always knew what Camille meant. Milo was autistic, gentle, brilliant, obsessed with whales, counting down to this trip like it was the most important moment of his life. And Camille knew that too, had always known that, had smiled politely through Milo's differences while quietly deciding they were inconvenient, and now she was saying it out loud. Lena sat up in the dark, her heart pounding too loudly in her chest, her husband shifting beside her, asking what was wrong while she couldn't even find the words to explain how deeply that message had cut. How it felt like someone had just told her her child didn't belong in the world. She typed back with stiff fingers asking what Camille meant, though she already knew, and the reply came fast and cold. You know he gets overwhelmed? This is supposed to be fun for everyone. Fun for everyone except the child who had been dreaming about it for months. Lena's jaw tightened as anger rose beneath the hurt. Memories flashing of every time Camille had subtly excluded Milo. Every birthday party where there was no space for him. Every comment about him being a lot. And she realized this wasn't about logistics. It was about control, about Camille deciding whose joy mattered and whose didn't. And Lena refused to let her sister make that decision. The next morning, the family still went, because Lena wasn't about to let one cruel message steal her son's happiness. Milo bounced with excitement in the back seat, clutching his whale plushie, completely unaware that someone had tried to erase him. And as they arrived at SeaWorld, the air was bright with music and laughter and the smell of popcorn and sunscreen, children running everywhere, families smiling for photos. But Lena's stomach twisted when she spotted Camille near the entrance with her kids, and a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. Camille's gaze flicked to Milo and then away, her lips pressing together like she was tolerating something unpleasant. And Lena felt something inside her harden, because this wasn't just a family disagreement anymore. This was a line being crossed. Camille walked over, voice sweet but sharp, asking if Milo had his headphones, if Lena planned to handle it, if he got upset, speaking about him like he wasn't standing right there holding his whale and beaming. And Lena felt rage surge through her veins as she knelt beside Milo and kissed his head and said loudly that Milo was exactly where he belonged, that this trip was for him too, that he wasn't a problem to be managed. And Camille's smile faltered for just a second, the first crack in her polished cruelty, because Lena wasn't playing along anymore. Other parents nearby glanced over, sensing the tension. Milo tugged Lena's sleeve, asking when they'd see the orcas, completely unaware that he was the center of a storm. And Lena took his hand and walked forward, past Camille, past the judgment, into the park. Her heart racing not with fear, but with resolve, because she knew now this trip wasn't just about whales or rides or family bonding. It was about confronting something that had been festering for years, and she was done being polite about it, done letting cruelty hide behind smiles. And as the gates closed behind them and the sounds of the park swelled around them, Lena knew this day was going to change everything, and Camille had no idea what she had just started. Lena felt the shift the moment they crossed deeper into the park, like the atmosphere itself had tightened. The cheerful noise suddenly layered with something sharp and watchful, Camille walking a few steps behind them with her kids, while her eyes stayed fixed on Milo like she was waiting for him to fail, for him to become the disruption she had already decided he was. And Lena could feel that silent expectation pressing against her back. Milo chattering happily about the map, pointing out where the orca show was and which tanks they needed to visit first. His joy so pure it almost hurt, and that made Lena more protective than ever, more aware of every glance Camille threw, every exaggerated sigh when Milo stopped to look at a sign, every comment muttered just loud enough to be heard about timing and schedules and keeping things on track, as if childhood itself was something that needed to be managed into neat boxes. And when they finally reached the Orca Stadium and sat down, Milo gripping the armrest with excitement, Camille leaned over and whispered that maybe Milo should sit closer to the aisle, just in case. And Lena felt her patience stretch thin like a wire about to snap. She replied calmly but firmly that Milo was fine, that he knew what to expect, that he had been watching videos of this show for weeks. And Camille gave a little shrug like she was indulging a fantasy, like she was waiting for reality to prove Lena wrong. The lights dimmed, music swelled, the crowd erupted into applause as the massive black and white shape of the orca rose from the water. Milo gasped, his eyes filling with wonder, his mouth falling open in pure awe. And for a moment everything was perfect, the sound of the water crashing, the trainers smiling, the crowd cheering, Milo clapping a little too loudly. But no one minded. No one except Camille, who flinched and glanced around as if embarrassed. And that was when Lena understood that Camille wasn't afraid of Milo causing a scene. She was afraid of him being seen, afraid of people noticing him, afraid of her perfect image being interrupted by a child who didn't fit her version of normal. And when Milo leaned forward and whispered excited facts about the orca's name and age, Camille stiffened and whispered sharply that he was talking too loud, and Lena turned to her and said quietly but clearly that he was whispering, that this was what joy looked like. And Camille's eyes flashed with irritation, because she wasn't used to being contradicted, especially not in public. And as the show continued, Lena noticed other parents smiling at Milo's enthusiasm. One woman even leaned over and asked him how he knew so much, and Milo lit up even more, happily explaining. And Camille looked trapped, surrounded by proof that Milo wasn't the problem, that her discomfort was, and that realization unsettled her. After the show, Camille pulled Lena aside near a row of vending machines, her voice low and tense, saying this wasn't what she had imagined, that things felt chaotic, that her kids were getting distracted, that this trip was supposed to be special for them, and Lena stared at her in disbelief, asking if Milo wasn't allowed to exist loudly in the same space as her children, if his happiness somehow took something away from theirs, and Camille snapped that Lena was being dramatic, that she just wanted things to be smooth and easy. And Lena laughed softly without humor and said that families weren't smooth, that children weren't neat, that love was messy and loud and sometimes inconvenient. And Camille's face hardened at that word, inconvenient, because it was too close to the truth she didn't want to admit, that she found Milo inconvenient. And in that moment, something inside Lena shifted from hurt to clarity. She saw Camille not as a sister she needed approval from, but as someone whose values were fundamentally wrong. And that made Lena fearless. She told Camille that Milo wasn't a problem to be managed, that if Camille couldn't handle him being part of the family, then that was Camille's issue, not Milo's. And Camille looked genuinely shocked, as if she had never considered that she could be the one in the wrong, her kids watching from a distance, confused by the tension. And Lena realized this confrontation wasn't just about today. It was about years of quiet tolerance and unspoken judgments finally being dragged into the light. And when Lena walked back to Milo and took his hand, she felt lighter despite the heaviness of the moment, because she was no longer shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. She was standing fully in her role as Milo's mother, his advocate, his shield. And Camille could feel that shift. She could feel that she was losing control of the narrative she had written in her head, and that unsettled her more than any disruption Milo could ever cause. As they moved toward the next attraction, the space between the sisters felt wider than the entire park, filled with wow. The tension didn't fade as the day went on. It thickened, settling into every interaction like humidity before a storm. Camille growing quieter but sharper, her comments fewer but more pointed, her smiles tighter, her patience thinner, and Lena could feel that something was being stored, not released. Camille watching Milo not with concern, but with calculation now, as if she were collecting evidence to justify the judgment she had already made. And it finally surfaced near the dolphin encounter where children lined up to touch the smooth gray backs as they surfaced from the water. Milo hesitated at first, overwhelmed by the crowd and noise, and Lena knelt beside him, speaking softly, giving him time, reminding him he didn't have to do anything he didn't want to do. And Camille's voice cut in, too loud, saying maybe Milo should skip it so the line could move faster. And Lena looked up slowly, the patience in her eyes gone, replaced by something firm and unyielding. She told Camille that Milo would decide for himself, that he wasn't in anyone's way, that the world didn't need to be rearranged to suit Camille's impatience, and Camille snapped back that Lena was always making everything about Milo, that her kids mattered too, and Lena replied calmly that this wasn't a competition, that compassion wasn't a limited resource, and Camille laughed bitterly, saying it must be easy to say that when your child is always the one needing accommodations, and that was the moment. The line that crossed from ignorance into cruelty, and the air seemed to still around them. Other parents glancing over, sensing the emotional temperature spike. Milo looking up confused, feeling the shift even if he didn't understand it. And Lena stood up slowly, her voice steady but shaking underneath, saying that accommodations weren't favors. They were what love looked like when you cared about someone who experienced the world differently, that Milo wasn't a burden. He was a child who deserved joy and patience just like any other. And Camille's face flushed, her eyes darting around as she realized people were listening now, that her words were no longer private, no longer safely hidden behind family walls, and she hissed that Lena was making a scene, that this was exactly what she had warned about. And Lena almost smiled at the irony, saying the only scene being made was Camille's inability to be kind, and that landed harder than shouting ever could. Camille's kids shifting uncomfortably, one of them whispering that Milo was nice, that he told them cool facts, and Camille froze at that, something like shame flickering across her face before being swallowed by defensiveness, and she snapped at her child to stay out of it, which only deepened the discomfort in the space. Lena felt a strange calm settle over her, because this was no longer about proving anything. It was about protecting something precious. And she turned back to Milo, guiding him gently toward the dolphin when he nodded that he wanted to try. And Milo smiled when the dolphin surfaced, and he touched it, his entire face lighting up, and a few people clapped softly, moved by the moment, and Camille stood there watching not just Milo, but the reaction around him, the acceptance, the warmth, the way the world she feared didn't actually reject him. It embraced him, and that was perhaps the most unsettling thing of all for her, because it meant her discomfort had no justification, no moral high ground. It was just prejudice dressed up as concern, and she couldn't escape that realization now. Not with witnesses, not with her own children watching, not with Lena standing tall beside Milo instead of shrinking, and Camille muttered something about needing a break, walking away toward the cafe, her shoulders tense, her posture rigid, while Lena stayed with Milo, brushing his hair back, telling him she was proud of him. And Milo smiled up at her, unaware of the emotional earthquake he had just triggered simply by existing as himself. And Lena felt tears sting her eyes, not of sadness, but of fierce love, of relief, of a long overdue release from the quiet guilt and accommodation she had carried for too long. She realized this day wasn't just about defending Milo. It was about redefining what family meant, about refusing to let love be conditional. And as she looked around at the strangers who had shown more kindness than her own sister in that moment, she felt the boundaries of her loyalty shift. Camille had drawn a line, and Lena had finally stepped to the other side of it, not in anger, but in truth. And the space between them now wasn't just emotional, it was ethical. It was a difference in what they believed children deserved, what kindness required, what love demanded. And that difference could no longer be ignored or softened or smoothed over. And Lena knew, deep in her bones, that whatever came next would not be gentle, because people rarely let go of their self-image without a fight. By the time the sun began to lower and the park lights flickered on, the emotional damage had already been done. Even if the words had stopped, Camille didn't return from the cafe with the same energy she left with. She came back quieter, restrained, as if she were holding something in. And Lena could sense it wasn't reflection. It was strategy. Camille wasn't reconsidering her behavior. She was deciding how to control the story, and Lena felt a strange calm about that now. because she was no longer afraid of what Camille thought or said. That power had evaporated the moment Camille showed the world who she was, and it happened faster than Lena expected, because when they all regrouped near the exit, Camille's voice suddenly turned sweet and performative, apologizing loudly for any tension, saying she was just worried about the kids being overstimulated, that she didn't mean anything personal, and Lena recognized the tone instantly, the public version of Camille, the one designed to look reasonable and caring, and Lena didn't contradict her, didn't argue, didn't raise her voice. She simply said calmly that words mattered, that intentions didn't erase impact, and that Milo deserved more than tolerance. He deserved respect, and the quiet firmness of that response unsettled Camille more than any confrontation could have, because there was nothing to twist, nothing to argue against, just truth. And a few people nearby nodded. One woman even murmured, "Exactly." And Camille's smile tightened again, her control slipping in small but visible ways. Later that evening, Lena posted a photo of Milo smiling with the dolphins, not tagging Camille, not naming names, just writing about how proud she was of her son and how kindness should never be conditional. And the response was immediate. Friends and even strangers commenting with support, sharing stories of their own children, their own families, their own moments of exclusion and defense, the post spreading farther than Lena expected. And by the next morning, Camille had messaged her asking why she had made things public, accusing Lena of humiliating her, of turning people against her. And Lena replied simply that she hadn't named Camille, that if Camille felt exposed, it was because she recognized herself in the story. And that was something only Camille could confront, not something Lena could fix. And that silence that followed felt heavier than any argument. Days passed, and the family group chat went quiet. Invitations stopped coming. Distance settled in where familiarity once lived. And while that loss hurt, Lena felt no regret, because what she had gained was clarity, boundaries, self-respect. Milo continued talking about the trip for weeks, drawing pictures of orcas and dolphins, replaying his favorite moments, untouched by the conflict that surrounded him, and that alone felt like victory. And Camille's world shifted too, whether she wanted it or not, because her children asked questions now, about kindness, about difference, about why Milo wasn't around anymore, and Camille was left either to confront the truth or to build more walls to hide from it, and Lena no longer felt responsible for which path Camille chose. She had chosen her own, and that path was one where love was loud, where protection was non-negotiable, where her son would never again be quietly pushed aside to preserve someone else's comfort, and that choice reshaped her family, her values, her sense of self. And if this story stirred something in you, if you've ever been made to feel like you or someone you love didn't fit, didn't belong, didn't deserve space, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what you would have done. Tell us if you've faced something similar, and make sure you subscribe to Roots of Revenge for more intense, emotional stories where truth rises and silence breaks, because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or violent or dramatic. It's simply refusing to let cruelty hide behind politeness ever again.